listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology, celebrating 25 years of broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
The X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X-Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, the X-Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, and across Europe on the Digital Satellite Network. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone at xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV, and of course, our radio website at xzonerradio.com. My guest this hour is Alistair Conwell. He was born in India and grew up in Australia, and that is where we're talking to Alistair this evening. He has 2 psychology degrees and has traveled widely. It was in Nepal, the Himalayan land of mysticism, where he first learned of the audible life stream. His articles on the audible life stream and meditation have been published internationally. Alistair's first book, The Audible Life Stream, Ancient Secret of Dying While Living, was published in 2010. It's available as an ebook and in paperback. His second book, Soul Comfort, Uplifting Insights into the Nature of Grief, Death, Consciousness, and the Love for Transformation, has recently been published. It's also available on ebook and in paperback. Joining us now from the land down under is Alistair Conwell. And Alistair, welcome to the X-Zone.
Thank you, Rob. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on your show.
It's our great pleasure. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what drew you to the world of mysticism.
I became interested in meditation over 20 years ago after studying at university. I was working a really high-pressure job, and I saw meditation as a way to help deal with some of the stresses at work. And becoming interested in meditation, I did more reading and practiced different meditation techniques. And so my interest in spirituality just grew from there because I was brought up as a Christian and just found myself wanting more than what mainstream religion was able to offer me at that time. And so it was from that interest in meditation that my interest in spirituality grew from there.
What is the audible life stream?
The audible life stream is essentially the consciousness, the conscious fabric of the universe. It's a Western term that reflects really the deep spiritual core of the universe. In the East, that conscious fabric of the universe goes by various different names. The God power, the Buddha nature, etc. But the audible life stream is the westernized term for that conscious fabric of the universe, which has a vibratory quality. In spiritual spheres, there's talk about different levels of consciousness and different vibratory frequencies.
Sure.
That all points to this concept that I talk about in my first book, which is the audible life stream.
You know, looking back in time to the late 60s, the hippie movement, Haight-Ashbury, all around the world, they were tuning in to the vibrations. You know, hey, man, you've got great vibes, the Beach Boys with good vibrations. Is this what they were tapping into?
Absolutely. It makes perfect sense because this conscious fabric of the universe has a vibratory quality. And that's certainly reflected in the findings of science as well. You know, science knows that every physical aspect of the universe has a vibratory quality. So, a wooden desk vibrates in a certain way to give it the qualities of its material, the wood.
Right.
A stone vibrates in a particular way, which gives it the quality of stone and masonry.
So which brings everything down to the atomic structure.
Exactly, which is vibrating as well. Those molecules, the atoms, are all vibrating. And underlying that physical vibratory phenomenon is the audible life stream, that spiritual phenomenon. It's the, I suppose, the ground force of reality.
Please stand by, Alistair. Thank you very much for joining you. I'm looking so much forward to talking to you the rest of this hour. Exo Nation, Alistair Conwell is our guest all the way from Australia. And if you'd like to get more information or get a copy of your own book, www.o-books.com/books/soul-comfort. Alistair and I will be back after this break. You will not want to miss the rest of this hour. I'm Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. Don't go away.
Afterlife expert Roberta Grimes was the first one to say that dying can be fun. Now her best-selling book, The Fun of Dying, is available in stores worldwide. So if you wonder whether death ends life, how it feels to die, or what heaven might be like, The Fun of Dying was written for you. And if you have always been afraid of death, or if you worry that your life has no meaning, let The Fun of Dying ease your fears and bring new meaning to your life. Nothing said in The Fun of Dying is based on the teachings of any religion. Instead, Roberta draws on evidence to explain how death happens, how it feels, and what comes next. A lot of the best death-related evidence was produced in the first half of the 20th century. When it is put together with recent discoveries, it tells a consistent and amazing story. Roberta Grimes blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. Her wonderful book, The Fun of Dying, is available on Amazon and at stores worldwide wherever books are sold. You're listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
While science pursues fact, magic accesses the quantum level, bridging random facts to form truth. As long as science and magic remain separate and polarized, the truth cannot be known. I'm Wilda Wiecka. Join me on the Science of Magic radio program dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. During each episode, I'll be speaking with experienced and respected scientists and mystics. From astrologers to astronomers, from medical doctors to shaman, the scientific method to dowsing and intuition, we will weave together information from seemingly divergent practices to promote unity and enlightenment. Join me, Wilda Wiecka, and the Science of Magic right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. For more information, visit www.thescienceofmagic.net.
ALISTAR began to demonstrate a metaphysical connection to the spirit world as a little girl. Her family noticed the connection, but it was a great-grandmother who told the family that Linnea was indeed gifted. The great-grandmother, who was also gifted, felt that Linnea had indeed inherited these attributes. It has been noticed that oftentimes such things are passed down through the generations. Linnea was also born with a caul, a thin white membrane across a newborn's face. Legend has it that if the baby is born with this caul, the child will have second sight, or what we call psychic abilities. Linnea Starr does past, present, and future, and has the gift of prophecy. It is written within scriptures that if you are able to give factual information, and prophecies indeed come true, the gift indeed comes from the divine realm. Linnea Starr does large interactive groups as well as private gatherings. For more information on Linnea Starr or to contact Linnea for a one-on-one consultation, visit her website at www.linneastar.com. That's www.linneastar.com. Welcome back, everyone. My guest this hour is Alistair Conwell. He's joining us all the way from Australia. And when I first connected with Alistair, I asked him if he could check his newspaper, tell me what the lottery numbers are. And I'd put them in today. We'd win tomorrow and split. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. But I tried, Alistair. I tried.
Yes, it was a good try.
Alistair, where did you get the inspiration to write your first book?
Well, I'd been traveling overseas, and I originally planned to be away just for a year. It's something a lot of Australians, and I imagine a lot of people around the world do. They backpack to various countries, and during that time, I came across some very interesting people. I stayed at various different spiritual communities, and I was on my way back to Australia. I was in Nepal. I'd been into India, where I was born. Mm-hmm. I was in Nepal, and I came across a book about the audible life stream and talking about this spiritual vibration, which sounded really interesting because it transcended mainstream religion. And at that point in my life, I realized that the various mainstream religions that I had been investigating over a number of years left me wanting more information and to go deeper into spirituality, and this concept of the audible life stream seemed to offer that. So when I came back to Australia, after just having discovered about this new concept of the audible life stream, I tried to find books about it and couldn't find anything in libraries. And I realized, well, this is something worth investigating. So I just kept on investigating further about near-death experiences and about out-of-body experiences and about cutting-edge scientific theories, and I found that they were pointing all to this spiritual vibration, which to me was, without doubt, the audible life stream. And so I decided to write about it, and specifically to provide evidence of the audible live stream from all these different domains. So from near-death experiences from around the world, from people who had out-of-body experiences. And all these people were clearly coming into contact, or well, not all of them, but certainly many of them, were coming into contact with, to them, was this quite unique spiritual vibration. And so that was the genesis of the book. And in the book I provide evidence from all these different domains, including cutting-edge science, of the audible live stream.
So when we're looking at paranormal occurrences, such as near-death experiences, out-of-body experience, astral projection, and even into the contacts that people are claiming to be having with spirits, are we just looking at something as simple as vibrations?
Ultimately, yes, I believe that's what it comes down to, because the various different higher levels of consciousness are differentiated by the different vibratory frequencies at those particular levels. So, you know, the sort of the at the very base or ego level of consciousness, at the physical realm, it's characterized by a particular vibratory consciousness that enables this realm to exist. Higher levels operate at higher frequencies of consciousness. And so that differentiates different levels of consciousness.
And of course, communication, vocal communication, is based on frequency as well. So
exactly.
So basically, what you're doing in I guess what we've been on air in 16 minutes, you've discovered the secret behind the paranormal. So thank you very much. Have a nice day, and we'll be on. No, but it does make sense, you know. Yep. And when you look at life is simple. We complicate the hell out of it.
Sure.
So where do we go from here now that we have a working theory to go on? How do we go about proving to the naysayers as well as the rest of the scientific community that this is what it all boils down to, with different frequencies and different levels of consciousness?
Well, what I think is really interesting, and I think one of the reasons that I became a little bit disenchanted with mainstream religion, is that this concept of the audible live stream is accessible to anyone and everyone.
Right.
The key is to go within and find that deep meditative silence, because it's in that silence that you can actually contact and tune into the audible live stream. And that process itself facilitates the raising of one's level of consciousness. So it's not about any ritualization or religious rites or anything like that, which, you know, I don't want to sound too critical, and that certainly is helpful for some people in terms of where they're at on their spiritual journey. But the main point is that this concept of the audible live stream is essentially our spiritual core, and we all have access to it by going within.
The truth is in each and every one of us.
Exactly. And there's no mediating force or entity that's required. It's directly accessible.
How does meditation work? What does it do? Meditation 10, 15 years ago wasn't as significant as it is today. Everybody you talk to, they talk about meditation. Those years back, you talked about meditation, you imagined a guru, a yogi somewhere in the lotus position. Yeah.
Yes, and you know, there are many forms of meditation, and the key is to find the form that works for oneself. To me, the highest form of meditation, the one that's most efficacious, is those that deal in silence. Because in silence, that's when we can access our true spiritual core, because we're not being distracted by any physical stimuli. So for me, a silent meditation, just going within, closing the eyes, blocking all external stimuli, that to me is the highest form of meditation. But any form of meditation where one is going within is beneficial. And certainly there have been scientific experiments recently that shows that, a regular meditation can reduce stress levels and has positive physical benefits for one's heart. There's all sorts of great benefits for meditation.
Let me ask you something, Alistair. Is daydreaming a type of meditation?
Perhaps on a quite superficial level, because really meditation is about emptying the mind of all thoughts. Daydreaming, of course, implies that one is, thinking about something.
Right.
And often when one starts on meditation, that's the first thing the mind wants to do, is to think about things, to daydream, to imagine things. And that's fine. That's the nature of the mind. But true meditation is about stopping those thoughts so that the mind becomes like a completely tranquil lake or pond where there's no ripples of thoughts there. It's just like a smooth mirror.
Sure.
Just total, complete emptiness of thought, which is easier said than done, let me say, but that's the purpose of true meditation.
Can we then say that the periods between dreams when we're asleep could be meditative?
Yes, without doubt, because it's interesting you mention about dreams, because I think sometimes, perhaps oftentimes, our dreams are not just the machinations of a sleeping body, but in fact could be spiritual experiences, because we are cut off from the physical world because we are asleep. There's no physical stimuli distracting the mind, and often, therefore, our so-called dreams, in inverted commas, could actually be experiences in the spiritual realm, and therefore have a meditative aspect to it. So yes, I think you're right.
Where does death, or what we call death, which I don't think is finality at all, I think that death is another way of metamorphosizing ourselves from this reality to the next, and I think that death is the equivalent of a cocoon. When we are alive, we are like the caterpillar. As we are getting ready to die, we enter the cocoon. When we do die, after a period, we're metamorphosed into a butterfly. So where does death lie in the big scheme of things?
Well, I think your description of death is exactly how I see it, as a transition from one state of consciousness, that is the physical realm, into the spiritual realm. There is nothing final about death in the grander scheme of things, because it is a point of transition, one that I believe is heavy with spiritual potential, because it's a portal almost through which we enter fully conscious into the spiritual realm.
And many people who have had near-death experiences report the tunnel or the porthole. So it makes perfect sense.
Yes, exactly. And for me, these people who report these near-death experiences, which I think are actually named incorrectly, because I think they're not experiences near death, they're actually experiences of death. And they give us tremendous insight into that important phase of transition going from the physical realm to the spiritual realm.
That is so true. That is so true. You and I have to take our news break. Please stand by. Thank you very much for joining us all the way from Australia. And during the news break, we'll have to try and figure out how we can get those lottery numbers.
Okay.
All right, Exo Nation, my guest this hour is Alistair Conwell. Here's how you can get your copy of Soul Comfort, just by going online. And here's the website, www.o, that's the alphabet O, hyphen, books.com /books/soul Comfort. We're going to be sending this email out with the contact information later on if you're part of the X Zone Nation. And if not, we're going to put it on our website, Facebook, and LinkedIn and other places so that we can share the message with you and share the information that Alistair has put together in his book, Soul Comfort. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And we'll be back on the other side of this news break. Don't go away.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? Well then, meet Dr. Kimberly McGeorge and her cutting-edge breakthrough knowledge that combines science with possibility. Dr. Kimberly brings real-life answers and healing to those open to alternative solutions. She teaches solution-based programs and classes that will change all areas of your life forever. Specializing in conscious creation, intuitive readings, and energy medicine, you can rapidly shift health, relationships, business, and money and abundance challenges quickly. Receive her best-selling book, Secret to Everything, at no cost by going to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone. That's right, transformation can start now. Just go to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone and receive Dr. Kimberly's book for free.
You're listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Thomas Jefferson was a Burgess of 27 when he met Martha Wales Skelton, a 22-year-old widowed heiress who was fondly called Patty by her family. They were married on January the 1st, 1772, and they took up residence in a cabin on the building site on top of a Virginia mountain that Thomas had named Monticello. As Thomas and Patty slowly built their first version of the great house at Monticello, the Revolutionary War was heating up. Patty, with difficulty, bore 5 children, but only 2 girls survived. Thomas's political career developed to the point where he was often away from home, but after he authored and signed the Declaration of Independence in Philadelphia, he resolved never again to leave his wife. He was elected the governor of Virginia, just as that state became the Revolution's last battleground. The Revolutionary War ended in 1781, and Thomas gladly retired altogether to my family, my farm, and my books. But Patty continued to want to bear her treasured husband a son, and late in the summer of 1782, she died of kidney failure at the age of 33, 4 months after having borne yet another girl. Thomas was so devastated by her death that he never remarried. He mourned her for the rest of his life, even as he helped to frame the peace in France and then became the first Secretary of State, the second Vice President, and the third President of the United States. This story is true. Thomas Jefferson was such an obsessive letter writer and record keeper that we know where he was and what he was doing nearly every day of his adult life. Every significant thing he says in My Thomas comes from his contemporary writings. My Thomas by Roberta Grimes is now available at Barnes & Noble, Costco, Target, Books A Million, Hudson Booksellers, Kmart, Walmart, Sam's Club, Walgreens, CVS, and online at Amazon.com. You can visit Roberta Grimes online at www.robertagrimes.com.
The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com.
Unwilling to be the government's deadly assassin, gifted psychic Kahara Mitchell went AWOL and ended up buried under rubble in the wake of a great tsunami. She regained consciousness far from Earth on the medical ship of a Daguerrean intergalactic fleet. Has she been rescued or abducted by aliens? The Chalice of Carrie, Kahira O'Donnell's latest paranormal science fiction romance, is the passionate story of an Earth woman and her destined mates, twin kings from another galaxy. Kahara uses her gifts fighting alongside Lords Rom and Ra in a war that will determine the destiny of galaxies. The Chalice of Carrie by Kahira O'Donnell is now available at KahiraO'Donnell.com or at Amazon.com.
You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. What happened in Benghazi is revealed by Nicholas Genix, author of Obama, Islam, and Benghazi. He informs the American people that President Obama deceived them by advocating a strong foreign policy prior to the 2012 presidential election, and Hillary Clinton supported this deception. As the title infers, there is a connection between Obama, Islam, and Benghazi. Ample evidence informs Americans that Obama's early indoctrination in the Quran developed an affinity for Islam, why the Quran is the source of discontent in many countries, and why the Obama foreign policy deception led to poor military action and caused the loss of American lives in Benghazi. Genix provides 36 questions for the Select Committee on Benghazi to validate if Americans are justified to mistrust President Obama and Hillary Clinton. An overview of Obama, Islam, and Benghazi is presented on the website www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com. Annie Callahan, dedicated to negotiating a position for Earth within the Daguerrean Coalition, had trained for 3 years to become an Earth ambassador. Yet, the very eve of her arrival at the capital ruling planet, she is claimed as destined mate to an oversized, mating-maddened vamp who swears he will never release her. Lord Aztaran, king of the Macian sector, has waited over 900 years for his destined mate. Having found her as an alpha vamp, he is unable to relinquish Annie, virtually holding her hostage until he can claim her. Yet Macians cannot survive without their mate's love. How could he strip her of her citizenship, her ambassadorship, and her freedom and expect to win her heart? With All That I Am by Kahira O'Donnell is the latest book in this exciting series, The Daguerrean Chronicles, guaranteed to keep readers coming back for more. With All That I Am by Kahira O'Donnell is available on Amazon.com and KahiraO'Donnell.com. Alistair Conwell is our special guest this hour, Exonation, and, it's nice to have a challenging, entertaining, and educational conversation with a guest, and that's exactly what we're getting tonight, this hour, with Alistair. Alistair, in your first book, you write about linear time being an illusion and show that illusion is related to the concept of karma. Can you explain that?
Sure. And that's a really good question, and one that I'm so glad you've asked, because it occurred to me many years ago that this concept of karma, and I'm sure your listeners would be aware of it because it's an Eastern sort of concept, but it's entered the vernacular of the Western mind. The concept of karma is really about cause and effect, as any scientist would sort of put it in those terms. And the relationship between the concept of linear time and karma occurred to me as a sort of a penny dropping moment one day. I was riding my push bike many years ago, because the concept of cause and effect implies linear time, because you have a cause at point A occurring, the effect has to occur somewhere along that arrow of time, that linear arrow of time, at a later point. And that's exactly what karma is. So at point A on that linear arrow of time, some event happens, and the cause of that event must occur further along at some point along that linear arrow of time. And so if the concept of linear time is an illusion, because that's related to our level of consciousness, and that's something I talk about in reasonable depth in my first book, then therefore the concept of karma must also be illusory, because it's dependent upon the concept of linear time.
Interesting.
That's why in the East, there's a view that if one can raise one's level of consciousness to a certain level, much higher than what we operate here at the physical realm, therefore one can overcome any karma that's attached to our existence here, because we are overcoming or able to overcome that concept of linear time.
The audible life stream is essentially a unique theory of consciousness. Now, in Soul Comfort, you provide a simple and unique way of describing the structure of consciousness. Can you expand on that?
Sure. Consciousness, as we were discussing before, or the audible life stream, is really another name for consciousness, because it refers to that vibratory level.
Right.
Now, in Soul Comfort, while writing that, I realized that in talking about different levels of consciousness, an easy way to graphically represent that is like having a series of concentric circles, and the point in the center of that circle could be seen as that point of soul, or soul consciousness, which is the highest and most purest form of consciousness. And the outer circle could be perceived or conceived as the ego consciousness, which we operate at in the physical realm. So it's the outermost form of consciousness. And each concentric circle leading to or towards that common central point in those concentric circles, the soul consciousness, those smaller concentric circles leading to that central point could be seen as higher levels of consciousness. And I realized that in my research and reading that, plant seeds are essentially built like concentric circles. You've got the outer coat of the seed being or known as the tester, and there are multiple levels of what's known as endosperm. And at the core is the actual seed itself, the core part of the seed. And so it's very much like how I imagine the structure of consciousness as being like the typical plant seed, with all these concentric layers of endosperm leading to the actual core of the seed.
I can visualize that.
I think it's an easy way to visualize it.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
In Soul Comfort, you also make reference to music of the spheres. What are the spheres?
Well, the music of the spheres is a phrase that's been attributed to the ancient Greek philosopher and Pythagoras, philosopher and mathematician Pythagoras.
Right.
Now, he talked about the music of the spheres in I think, different ways. I think he was referring to it not just in a mathematical way, but in a deeper spiritual, esoteric way as well. Mm-hmm. Because he coined the phrase because he was able to map the movement of the planets with mathematical equations, which he then was able to attribute to certain musical notes, and therefore he concluded that the movement of the planets could create a symphony or a harmony, hence the music of the spheres. But you know, when we were talking about the audible live stream earlier, mm-hmm. I don't think I mentioned that, in fact, at very high levels of frequency, that vibration of the audible live stream has musical qualities. And this I found particularly interesting when researching my first book, because many people who have had these near-death experiences talked about hearing a mysterious spiritual music, yes, which they knew was not coming from anything of the physical realm. They actually often make a very clear distinction between the music that they remembered hearing, while living as mm-hmm. physical beings, because they said it was just so expansive and so spiritual in nature. And it was clear to me that these people who were having these near-death experiences were unknowingly coming into contact with the musical qualities of the audible live stream. And so the music of the spheres that Pythagoras talked about is also a clear indication to me that he wasn't just talking about it in a mathematical sense, but in a more esoteric sense, and suggests to me that he probably had some knowledge of the spiritual vibration of the universe that I refer to as the audible live stream, because he was talking about a universal harmony that we all have access mm-hmm. to.
Is it possible that the music of the spheres that people talk about when they have their experiences is what has people also describing as angelic sounds?
Yes, absolutely. I think any spiritual sound, mm-hmm. Whether it be musical in quality right. or not, is a reflection of the audible live stream because of its different vibratory frequencies. For example, in the astral realm, I've read cases of people hearing the sound of flowing water, for example, or waves washing onto a beach, or even the sound of cicadas. And bells has a musical quality, but all those other different sounds are again reflections of the different vibratory frequencies of the audible live stream, whether they're perceived as emanating from angels or wherever. But they're all different qualities of the audible live stream. At the highest level, as I've said, it has musical qualities. Mm-hmm. But at the lower level, it has different characteristics as well.
In Soul Comfort, you write, "Love is the face of the soul." Tell me more about that, because that is such a lovely little saying.
Oh, thank you. Well, it really gets back to all that we've been talking about in terms of mm-hmm. the nature of consciousness. Because consciousness is the fabric of the universe, and therefore that's what makes death not something that's final, because consciousness doesn't die. The physical right. body dies, yes, but consciousness doesn't. Now, because consciousness is the fabric of the universe, the primary quality of consciousness is a unifying quality. And love, as I'm sure you and all your listeners would agree, is also a unifying quality.
Sure is.
Love is like the gravity of consciousness. Just like gravity in the physical realm is a unifying force, it brings different bodies together and it allows different planets in our galaxy to revolve around the sun. Love is also unifying in that it draws consciousness together. And in soul comfort, I suggest that that unifying force of consciousness, that love force of consciousness, applies not just at the physical realm, which is why people fall in love as physical beings, but that it operates at the higher levels of consciousness that we've been talking about as well. And therefore, a little bit like if you imagine it in soul comfort, this is the example I use. If you imagine the double helix structure of DNA, it's that twisted ladder structure that I'm sure you and your listeners would be familiar with. And that twisted ladder structure is connected at different points along those vertical structures by horizontal structures, which is why it's known as a ladder structure, because it looks like a twisted ladder.
Right.
And so I imagine that the consciousness at different levels is connected between different beings at horizontal points, just like that ladder structure, so that at the astral realm we are connected with someone, just as we're connected with someone in the physical realm, and at the higher realms as well. And therefore, when someone's physical body dies, that connection of consciousness is lost at the physical realm, but not at the higher levels of consciousness.
It's interesting that you see grief as having the potential to transform us, because most people see grief, my friend, as just a time of deep sadness.
Sure. And to me, it has the potential to transform because I see grief as a spiritual wound that requires a spiritual healing.
Right.
Because, as I've said, the connections that we have with our loved ones doesn't just function at the physical level. Because those connections remain at higher levels of consciousness, it means that not only do we still have those connections after someone's physical body dies, but it allows us in our grief to reflect and be open to the spiritual implications that death presents us with. So if one is able to perceive one's grief in a spiritual context, it allows us to deepen our interest in spirituality, to reflect upon our own physical death, whenever that will occur at some future point in time. And therefore, it gives us an opportunity to perhaps transform our lives in a spiritual way, to perhaps change in quite profound ways the trajectory of our lives, to deepen our interest in spirituality. And I think therein lies that potential for transformation, because of the potential changes that one can make when one opens oneself up to the possibility of deepening our sense of the spiritual in whatever form that can take.
Sure. So basically, grief brought on by another could be a wake-up call for us.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Because, as I said, it just allows us to reflect on the way we're living our lives, what values we may have, whether we are pursuing the goals that perhaps we set for ourselves at some earlier point and perhaps have forgotten about them. So it's a point, it allows us to take stock of how we're living our lives, what we intend to do with our lives in the future. So I certainly see it as having that potential to be transformative even though, as you say, there's no denying the fact that grief is a very sad time in our lives.
Yes.
But I think to only see it as a time of sadness, I think is really only looking at grief from one particular side or aspect of it. I think there's a deeper spiritual aspect to it that we can open ourselves up to as well.
I agree with you 100% because grief just doesn't happen when someone dies. Grief happens when you change a job, when you move, when you change schools. And these are all wake-up calls. They're new beginnings.
Exactly. That's right. Potentially new opportunities for different, more positive things to occur in one's life. Absolutely, I agree with you.
All right, stand by, my friend. You and I have to take our final break for this hour. It's been a very, very informative hour, and thank you very much for joining us all the way from Australia tonight. And damn it, we didn't figure out how to win the lottery, so we'll have to do it the old-fashioned way, my friend. Buy tickets. Exo Nation, my guest this hour is Alistair Conwell, and if you'd like to contact Alistair, here's the website, www.o-books.com/books/soul-comfort. As I said, Alistair Conwell is our guest, and we'll both be back on the other side of this break as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't forget, X Zone Nation, starting May the 16th, it's Monday. We'll be live Monday through Friday from 6 p.m. until 10 p.m. Eastern on the Mutual Broadcast Network, the X Zone Broadcast Network, and Talkstar Radio Network. And then the 6 to 10 show will be repeated in its entirety from 1 a.m. until 5 a.m. in the morning. Interesting topic, interesting gentlemen. We'll both be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
Little children aren't the only ones afraid of the dark. Millions of soldiers return from war zones with PTSD, anger, frustration, fear, and loneliness, much of which surfaces during the darkness of the night. You have the chance to change the lives of these American heroes. Songs and Stories for Soldiers.us provides free MP3 players for these men and women. With a list of 3 million songs in 16 different styles, 100,000 audiobooks, and 30,000 old-time radio programs, every veteran can find something to soothe and comfort them at no cost. All our players contain an 8-hour audio program designed to help veterans fall asleep. With 1,500 plus vets now participating, it's our goal to deliver 10,000 audio players this year. Go to our website at songsandstoriesforsoldiers.us. Help us help a veteran make it through the night.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
You're listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. If you enjoy reading a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love From Out of the Woodwork by William S. Peckham. Sean Kennedy, a Toronto contractor, buys derelict houses, guts them, and turns them into multi-family dwellings. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, a century house in ruins, and starts the renovation, the house fights back. He is visited by ghosts of owners past. His visions are triggered by touching an oak mantle, reading a faded letter, opening an old locket, or opening a brand new casket in the basement.
These visions will take you on a trip across southern Ontario from Niagara Falls to Toronto to Kingston. From Out of the Woodwork is now available in paperback and on your favorite electronic reader. To order your copy of From Out of the Woodwork, go to www.williamspeckham.com. That's www.williamspeckham.com. Welcome back, everyone. My guest this hour is Alistair Conwell. And if you'd like to get a hold of Alistair's latest book, Soul Comfort, this is how you do it. You go to www.o-books.com/books/soul-comfort. And I'll tell you what, Exonation, this has been a very informative hour. We all talk about good vibrations. Hey, man, I can feel your vibes. And then, like John Lennon has said over and over again, and so many great musicians have used the theme of love. And John Lennon said, all you need is love. So when you take good vibrations, all you need is love. The people of the 60s, the hippies, they were dead on. They knew what they were talking about. And, maybe they were slightly ahead of their time, but the message is more important today than it was back in the late 60s. And Alistair, thank you so much for joining us tonight to help us better understand and remember the importance of the message of vibrations and love.
You're welcome, Rob. I'm really enjoying the interview, and I'm so glad to be on your show.
For someone who may have recently lost a loved one and is experiencing grief, what advice would you give them?
I think it's important to acknowledge that grief is a perfectly natural response to the loss
right.
Of a loved one's physical body. Equally, I think it's important to understand that connection that one has with that loved one doesn't die with the physical body. While the physical body dies, our connections we have to our loved ones remains at higher levels of consciousness. And we've talked about that concept of higher levels of consciousness and how we can connect with people at those higher levels simultaneously. So once one has got over that initial shock that is always associated with grief, I think it's important for one to take time to reflect on that grief from a spiritual perspective, to take stock of one's life, as we talked about earlier, to perhaps look at how one can deepen our sense of the spiritual from the perspective of our grief. Because as I said earlier, I see grief as ultimately a spiritual wound that requires some form of spiritual healing in whatever form that may take. So I think it's important for someone to embrace that grief rather than sort of trying to put it down or suppress it, which is often what can happen, particularly in Western societies. But I think it's important to embrace that grief, because when we embrace our grief, we're actually embracing ourselves as spiritual beings. And in doing so, we open up the potential to transform our lives in quite deep spiritual ways.
As I said before, Alistair, it's great having you on the show. We look forward to having you back on. And do me a favor, let our listeners know what your website is one more time.
Sure. It's, let's see, the actual address, I don't know, but it's on the O Books website, which is my publisher. And that's
www.books.com/books/soul-comfort. Take care of yourself, Alistair. Don't be a stranger. And like I said, I look forward to the next time you and I meet here in the X Zone.
I look forward to it as well. Thank you so much for having me on your show, Rob.
My great pleasure. X-Zone Nation, that was Alistair Conwell, and, well, that's it. Another 4 hours up, 4 hours down. Remember, X-Zone Nation, we are our brother's keeper. It's always such a great help when you can dig a little deeper into your pocket, give something from your pantry, help somebody make a difference in their life. So until tomorrow night, Just remember, always keep your eyes to the sky and your heart to the light. Good night, everyone.
Closing time. One last call for alcohol. So